Hello. Welcome to NETMOD in Madrid, IETF 123. And of course, we're also online. I have with me Kent Watson. You can see him on the screen. He's remote. And also our working group secretary, James, is up here with next to me. So yes, it's Monday. And yes, it's an IETF meeting. So you may or may not be familiar with our note well. If you're not familiar with the note well, we have rules that govern how we contribute technically to the work of the IETF. Basically, anything you say, anything you contribute becomes part of our permanent record and is governed by the rules listed at the bottom of this page. If you're not familiar with it, I think if you just Google IETF Note Well, you'll have plenty of opportunity to read up on it. But again, anything you say or contribute is part of our record and is governed by our IPR, intellectual property rules, and is a formal contribution. Please familiarize yourself with these rules if you are not already familiar. Similarly, we do have a code of conduct. This is about how we interact with each other, not about how the technical work is done, but how we treat each other. And our rules say treat each other with respect, keep it professional. Remember, you might get heated on a technical point, but don't direct any of your comments at a personal level. Stay to the technology, stay focused on the technical points, behave professionally, treat each other with respect. Thank you for those who've made it to the room. Please do sign in. There's QR code in the back. Don't think we have the QR code on the screen. We will be doing 1 or 2 polls, so it's really important for you to sign in. For those who are remote, welcome. We will be using the queue to manage both in-person and remote comments so that we have fairness between those who are here and those who are not. If you are going to make a comment at the mic and you're in the room, please make sure to enter into the queue. Thank you. I just made the point about queue control. I was a little ahead. We also are using our collaborative note-taking. It's very helpful if you can jump on, and the link is on the chat. If you go to chat in the Meet Echo window or go to our agenda, you will find this link. We take notes together. We don't have to record what's on the slides. It's more about capturing the discussion. And if you make a comment at the mic, please do jump in, make sure your full name, first name, and last name is spelled correctly and that your comment was appropriately captured. If you want to say something that wasn't said at a mic, you can do so in chat. Don't do it in the note taking. If you put it in the notes and it's not said somewhere, we're just going to remove it. You were here. That's great. We know that. So let's move on. Now that's there for people who are reading the slides beforehand. So we have a quite dense document update because we have some documents that we've been working on for a long time that have moved forward in the process. So this is actually, this slide is, while dense, is showing really good work by the working group, and kudos to all of you who have participated and made it possible for us to advance these documents. The first one is syslog, the Yang syslog model. This one being an RFC is really momentous. I've been a chair for this group for a while, and this document predates me coming in as chair. So this document has really taken a lot to get here. So thank you all for staying with it and getting it done. And I think Kent did a lot there, so kudos to Kent in particular. But everyone who contributed, appreciate that. In the RFC editor queue, we have 3 documents. These are good and important updates. We had a long discussion on some of these documents at the last meeting, so it's great to see them in the editor queue. On the documents that have been submitted for publication, I really want to point out the ones related to versioning. Versioning has been a really important topic, and I'd say this marks the halfway completion, maybe 60% completion. So we still have more work to do, and those are the ones that we're going to be talking about at the beginning of our session. But that really is an important bit of work, and so thank you to the group. Another pair of documents that took a lot to get through are the first two listed. Sorry, not the first two. The interface VLAN model and interface Yang model. Those also have been out there for a while, and we're getting real close. We'll hear about a little open topics by Scott. And thanks to Scott and Rob for doing that. Kent, do you want to say anything about immutable flag?
We're waiting for a couple updates from Rob and Jason Stern. And just to confirm that the most recent update to the draft addresses their comments. As soon as those confirmations are received, then the working group the last call will close and we can proceed with the publication.
That's great. The last comment on this slide is the documents not on the agenda are actually included in the update on the requirements. Joe has status on those, even though they're not specifically being presented. We did have one outgoing liaison, and that has been on the list. We discussed it. If you have questions about it, take a look at it and send questions to the list. But I think this has been fully discussed. Actually, Ken, was there an additional point you wanted to make on this? I forget.
No, there wasn't. It was. I think it was no action required. So it's just informative, and we're just informing the liaison what the results were of the outcome of the liaison.
Mahesh?
So comment on immutable flag. This came up in the 3GPP IETF coordination meeting just about an hour ago. They were inquiring about the status of the document. We just indicated that it's, I guess, close to being approved. So.
Thank you. Our agenda was updated from the original, but without anything significant. Balazs, go ahead.
Sorry, about the immutable flag, as it did not become part of the data model like a Yang extension or something like that. It's not what 3GPP asks for. So, yeah. We didn't manage to get a compromise, it seems. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. No changes to the agenda. We're all pretty familiar with working remote. Use the list. If you want a virtual meeting, either formal or informal, let us know. We can make the resources available to you. And we do want updates at every meeting on what it's going to take to finalize the documents. And even though nothing went to the list on those last 3, we're getting it in one of the slide decks. So with that, that's the update. And we're going to move on to Scott. The clicker. Oh, I don't know about that clicker, but you can use filter. Do you want? Which one do you want? I'll take this. Kent, you're changing, right? Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Is something happening?
Just give it a second.
Just wait. Okay. Perfect. I'm Scott Mansfield. I am affiliated with Ericsson. Rob's also in the room, so if there's questions, I'll just make sure that he answers them. This is a very short update. This is a long, I mean, what, 10 years now? I don't know how long. It's been a long time. And I put the two together to do, to kill one bird with, or two birds with one PowerPoint. So what we have in here is the sub-interface VLAN model. It's currently in revised ID needed, thanks to Mahesh for a great set of comments. We've gone through the comments that we've received and written some responses to those. Rob and I have a meeting tomorrow morning. If people are interested in this and want to come work with us while we update the drafts, you're certainly more than welcome. And so where there's several editorial updates, the first bullet and the last bullet are always the same, right? It's like the several editorials are needed to be fixed. And then we need to review the Yang guidelines and update as appropriate for the examples and the JSON instances and the names of IP addresses that you use for examples. There's plenty of guidelines for those. Make sure those are all correct. And some specific information about this module that is needed is we need to make it clear in the text of the document that it's Yang 1.1. There's also some interesting things about unknown NCAPs, and it's a statistic that we need to collect and we need to know where to collect it. So that's being discussed. There was some discussion on the name that we have for the second tag because we were using the words outer tag and we didn't want to use inner tag because if there's more than two tags, we want to make sure that it was the second tag after the outer tag. So that's why it's called second tag. And then there's some other diagrams that need to be added for this. We'll try to do the cool thing where you can do them in, ASCII art and then run them through the SVG generator for HTML. So for the interface extension, these two drafts are somewhat related. So that's why I put all of these together. And like I said before, this one is revised AD needed. The updates, first bullet, last bullet are the same. There's editorials. Thanks to Mahesh again for going through the document with a fine comb and pointing out the things that we need to make it a lot better. And then the same thing about the guidelines. It's instances, it's making sure we're using example colon and all those kinds of things. And then here there is, since this is about sub-interfaces, we need to make sure that the definition of sub-interface is clear. So we have a response back to Mahesh's comments, so hopefully that's good enough. But like I say, again, we'll have a conversation tomorrow between me and Rob. And the plan for these drafts is that after this IETF, we will very quickly update the drafts again. And then that should satisfy the revised ID. And then it's whatever the chairs need to do to get it looked at again. I don't know. So that's it. We're working on it. New version out. Oh, I said that. And of course, the final bullet here is always the most important bullet, patience and determination. So thanks.
Great. Thank you for your persistence as well.
Persistence.
And the chairs don't have to do anything. As soon as you submit it, it'll go right back to
It'll go
Mahesh.
right back. Oh, okay. Great.
Unless he sends it back to the working group for some reason, which we really hope he doesn't do.
Oh, God, I hope not.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. And also thanks for running ahead. Joe, you're up next with versioning requirements. Just give it a minute.
Hello, I'm Joe Clark, presenting on behalf of a group of people who get together once a week, more or less, to talk about Yang versioning. This will be one of two presentations. Rob will go into packages in a little bit more detail later. A while back, Rob started this Yang Push Lite presentation with some AI-generated images, and I thought that'd be a good icebreaker for a Monday meeting. So I graphically asked AI to generate an image that depicted where we are with Yang module versioning. You can see Kent and Lou there in the back rooting us on. We've gotten SemVer, Yang SemVer, Yang module versioning and the file naming conventions kind of over the IESG line. Rob has activated beast mode on Yang packages there. He's been hitting the gym, and you'll get a lot more of that after this presentation. Yang schema comparison, they're just about to get back into the race. And unfortunately, Yang schema selection is kind of taking a break. But we'll get to all of that in detail. So this just yeah. See, now everyone's in. Now everyone's into the meeting. Now we're ready to get going. Now some boring text slides. One of the yeah, I like that. One of the things that I missed in the cutoff was resurrecting the versioning requirements. Again, this document, versioning requirements, is not to go to RFC. This is just to stay there, to stay fresh, to let us know why we're doing this in the first place and what we need to accomplish to say that we're done. These are the high-level requirements. There's a lot of sub-requirements under that our work is supposed to address. As of maybe about an hour ago, I have resurrected this, so it's now at version 12. No additional text has changed. It's just to keep the draft alive, so we have something to anchor these conversations on. These are the requirements we're trying to achieve, and I'll show you how the current drafts align to these requirements. This, again, is the work, again, in boring text format. So we have the top 3 documents are with the IESG in some level, and we're getting additional reviews at a broader IETF stance for them. Actively being worked. So this is what we are talking about for the most part on our Tuesday calls, and I'll get to how you can join those at the end. That's Yang packages work. So that is currently at Rev 6, and as you'll hear from Rob, a lot has gone into that and is continuing to go into that, and we would really appreciate more feedback there. There is some initial work. Per and Michael have been doing some initial work on the tooling around Yang schema selection. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. And the work that is stalled is around the schema selection, or schema comparison, I should say. Sorry, these two should reverse, I think. Schema comparison, that tooling has the initial work. Sorry, thanks, Per. I don't know how we missed this. So switch 5 and 6. So 6 has the initial work, 5 is stalled in the schema selection. Again, more specific details. So these are the drafts that have gone to the IESG. Just after I minted these slides and sent them into the chairs, Eben completed a review of Yang Simver on behalf of Yang doctors. I responded to him and he's responded back to me. I've taken most of his comments already and folded them into our Git repository. We'll probably discuss some of his other comments on an upcoming Tuesday call, and then we plan to have a revised ID that addresses his comments there. Same thing with Yang module versioning. We got feedback from Yang doctors on that, and Rashad is folding those comments into the document as editor there. Packages, again, Rob is going to go over this in very much detail right after I give up the microphone. It doesn't address any of the specific requirements, and it says that. However, it sets the stage for things like schema selection, and it really adds some additional, I would say, color and context to this whole versioning work. So ensuring that things can work together, ensuring that we can get a holistic schema that makes sense for a given network element. That's where packages is focusing, and it kind of ties together and brings in elements from all of this work in a very usable, hopefully a very usable manner. So I'll give Rob more opportunity there. So the schema comparison work, again, this is around the tooling. So as I mentioned, Per and Michael Vasco have been doing some work on this, writing code actually, and that's where they're focusing. They're focusing on having a working reference implementation of this by the next IETF, by Montreal, and as such, they've let the draft text expire. So their plan is to get that reference implementation done first, and then they'll focus on updating the draft, resurrecting it, and getting it for things that, concrete things that we can discuss as a working group. On the schema selection, this is still at 0.0, and we just haven't gotten to it. So the work there is stalled, but this would be a good thing if people are interested in this to jump in to see how packages might interact with this and what we could do to bring this work forward and start making some more progress on it. So our next steps, I don't expect anyone to memorize that URL, but the slides are in Data Tracker. So if you are interested in joining our Tuesday calls, they are open. They are part of the IETF WebEx. So if you go to IETF.webex.com, you'll see this as part of the schedule, but you can click on that. We meet Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern time, aligned to the US. So for daylight savings time, adjust. We're currently looking at packages. That's what the weekly calls generally do. However, Michael has come and said, I want to talk about this work I'm doing with schema comparison, and we'll just talk about that. We've got reviews for Yang module versioning and Yang SimVer. We'll spend some time to talk about that. So even though packages does take a lot of the focus, we're willing to have discussions about all of this work if there's people passionate enough to join us and have those conversations. If you're interested on the tooling aspects, I'm sure Per and Michael would love you to contribute and reach out to them to do so. You can reach out on the mailing list. They both read that. And like I said, if you're interested in looking at the schema selection, by all means, take a look at that 0.0 draft and see how that might be modernized, brought up to speed, and resurrected. That is the presentation. Any questions? Rashad.
Rashad from Equinix. So not a question, but a statement. We got comments from Jan also on module versioning. We have to discuss those. I don't know if we got comments from him on SimVer too. So it's more than Yang Doctor for, it's more than comments from Yang Doctor for module versioning. And I think Mahesh asked for clarification for some of the comments. But it's, yeah.
Okay, so moral of the story is we got considerable feedback, not just Yang Doctors on module versioning. All I've seen, and unless someone wants to point out an omission, all I've seen is Eben's review from Yang Doctors on Yang SimVer. But we are very appreciative of that. Other comments or questions? Okay, well.
All right, awesome. Thanks for the update.
Absolutely.
And, if you didn't hear it, I think Joe said, if you would like to contribute to these documents, show up at these meetings. So it's really a call for more participation, wider contribution.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks. Rob, Yang packages. Wait one moment. There you go.
It's vaguely high enough, maybe. It always feels tricky to follow Joe because he sort of teased me up as a really good, exciting presentation, but I'm afraid this is mostly wall of text slides. But hopefully I'll try and keep you interested in what we're doing. I'm also hoping I've got more than 6 minutes to present because otherwise I have to go very fast. Yes, I have. That's fine. Yeah. Fine, I won't take all that time. So in terms of solution overview, Joe sort of talked through most of this. I don't want to recap that again. It's sort of showing you the stuff above the line is work that we've finished. The stuff below the line is the stuff we're still looking at. We are maybe thinking of introducing a potential 4B IETF packages draft. And what I mean by that is the draft that we're presenting is Yang packages as a general structure. We might also try and do a separate document describing how you use Yang packages to organize IETF Yang modules, as an example. So, so I'll talk a little bit about that. I don't know whether that would come as part of this set or something else that follows on separately. And I've mentioned about Michael and Per already, so that's fine. A recap of what Yang packages is. So when I wrote these slides, they said to me, look, this has been going on for such a long time. It'd be good to try and just recap people to understand what problem you're solving and why. I mean, what's the purpose of this work? Now, where this is coming from is that today devices use Yang library to export all the modules that particular device is currently or server is implementing. And so if you're managing a network with 10,000 devices, you're going along and fetching this Yang library information for all those devices. And in many cases, it's likely to be the same or very similar for lots of those devices. So there's sort of two observations here is there a way we can organize this data more efficiently than just a flat list that's in Yang library? And two, is there a way we can make this data more readily available offline so that you don't necessarily have to download it from all the devices. Instead, you can just check that the device is exporting the same API that you expect it to. And one of the key changes between like Yang library, which gives you a flat list of modules, or pretty much a flat list with module sets, and module sets do cause some problems in some cases. This one is hierarchical in its nature. So it allows you to define packages for a particular aspect. For example, maybe IETF would define a package for BGP, which is all the BGP related modules and dependencies put together. They might define another one for ISIS. And again, the same idea, all the related ISIS modules would go together into a Yang package. Then you might have an IETF routing package that combines those two and says, this is either all the IETF routing protocols or a subset of the routing protocols for a core network. And we group those together in a package. And then when a vendor comes along and implements this, they might say, well, we're going to take those, the IETF routing package, and we might have a package of our own Yang modules, our native ones. We might come along and apply some deviations. So again, you have those separate packages. All of these are grouped together in a hierarchical fashion and included and combined together and versioned. And then they're made available by the device advertising what packages it supports at the top level. It gives you the ability of the device to advertise and export those other packages as well, but also make these available offline in files. So all you can do as a device is just check that the device supports the packages you expect it to. What else to say? So we version them using Semver. That's like an obvious choice for us to do, which is helpful. And it means you can sort of compare package versions over time and compare two different packages and see how they change and differ in the modules and potentially how they differ in their schema. I've mentioned offline and URLs. And finally, to go along with this, the expectation is there'll be some tooling, I talked about this a little bit, to allow you to convert a Yang package and its hierarchical definitions into a flat list again, a Yang library list. So you can then load the schema in using existing tools, or compare these two things, or say, I'm going to update the modules in this package. What should the new version be if you follow the Yang Semver rules? So that's a quick recap. We'd stopped or delayed doing Yang packages work for a while we were working on module versioning in Semver and while we were all having fun with COVID. And then we sort of picked it up again at IETF, around IETF 121. And at the time when we picked it up again, we started discussing it just before one of the meetings, and we made some decisions on how we could progress this work in a better way. And we said we wanted to keep it simple. We wanted to remove this complexity between API and implementation packages that went. We wanted packages just to define what is there rather than abstractly what might be there. So we removed the idea of optionality where an IETF routing package might have all these optional different packages for the different routing protocols. We said, no, that's too complex, at least for the initial version. We're going to keep it simple. We said, does it make sense for a package to say that it contains deviations? It's like, well, no, we don't need that flag. You can find that out from the files. We also discussed about whether or not we need to support mounted schema, or that could be deferred. The conclusion was actually mounted schema needs to go in there, because if you're going to represent the IETF packages, any realistic device that supports VRFs is going to need to use mounted schema. So we do have that support in. It does add some complexity, but not too much. And the last one was about checksums. It's like, can you reliably determine what a package definition is and checksum that data? And we decided we won't do that now. We'll delay that until later if we need to. And we've been continuing to work in the theme. So nothing's changed in terms of what we're doing. We may have added a tiny bit of complexity, but basically we've been working on the same thing. At IETF 122, based on us having discussions and things, we had some conclusions and we made these decisions. One was we should write a simple package compiler to try these things, like running code's always nice, so let's do some of that. We also said it'd be helpful to maybe start a separate draft for discussing like the design of IETF packages and the lifecycle of those. So again, a different form of running code or eat your own dog food. So we had some discussion about that. And the last one we said is like we should try and sort of test using packages to gain some further experience. So in terms of where we are, the first one, we started that. I've started writing a package compiler, some code, and I've used that to sort of make some of the examples. It's not complete yet. It's a work in progress. I'm hoping if I get permission that I'll open source this, but at the moment, there's some work going in that area. I've also started a draft and looking at the IETF package definitions as well, hand in hand with writing a tool. So that work has started. There's still quite a lot of work to do in that area. Nothing's published in that sense, and it's not our #1 priority. We want to get this draft finished. Yang push light is dragging in particular directions, but there's some interest in that direction. Ramakuma, do you want to ask your question now? Are you remote or local?
Yeah, can you just go over what a package compiler is, or what is the expected output it produces?
Good. That's a good question. So I want to be able to build package definitions very quickly. So later on, you'll see the diagram of what a Yang package looks like in Yang schema, and that would be converted into JSON. But writing those things directly, they're not the easiest thing to manipulate or write. So instead, I've written some tool that uses a build tool to basically define dependencies between packages and inclusions, and it generates the JSON structure automatically. So that's one aspect, is to generate these things easily and manage them more easily. And then related to that, this sort of compiler is to do with like package tooling to say, can you generate me the Yang library equivalent information? Can you compare two packages and tell me how they've changed? Can you filter them out? Can you report what packages you've modified or you don't implement? So that sort of thing. I can cover that in a bit more detail later, I remember. And the last one was to test some packages to gain further experience. So that's still to do. So that's sort of have a dependency on these first two progressing a bit further, and the draft to get to the point where we sort of think we're pretty much done. So, but that's on the to-do list. So as Joe pointed out, we've spent a lot of time over the last cycle. We've been meeting on a weekly basis, and we've been in a lot of those weeks progressing the package work, both from an abstract high level point of view, discussing issues and how that moves forward, and also change the document. So we're much closer, I think, to being done. The document still has quite a lot of work in terms of text in places, but I think in terms of the core concepts and ideas, I think we're close to being done at the moment. I may be wrong when it gets further along, but we're getting very close. We have made some quite big changes, and I talked through some of those today, and we still have a long list of issues on our GitHub tracker, not trasher, to look through. But we intend to, now we update the document, to try and trash as many of those issues as we can. So they no longer apply. We've covered those. So there's more issues being reported than ones we think are there. But we're focused on the core things. And we've restructured the doc. So we've gone through and reordered the sections to much better reflect where packages are now today than where they were when we picked them up again like a year ago. So there's more work to do to reorder the sections, but the earlier parts of the document, I hope, are better and improved readability, simplified in places, and more focused on the things that we think are most important. So there's been lots of work done. Do I still have a clicker that works? Yes. So the significant changes, what have we done? So this is a high level. I'll talk about all these in detail. I'll show you the tree diagram in a minute. So we removed support for module tags and things. We didn't think that was necessary. That's gone. We finished adding the work to support Yang mounts. We'd started that, and we sort of think we're pretty much complete there. It'd be good to have reviews and stuff. We've added an automatic way of resolving when you include different module versions. Before we had this as a manual process. We've added an automatic one, and we discussed the reasons why, and I'll cover that in a bit more detail. We've added the ability to take an included package and exclude features and modules. We felt that's important because I'm realistic, and I'll talk more details about what that means. And related to that, we also had a big discussion about what does it mean if you say you implement a package, and what does it mean in terms of the sub packages that it imports. What does that mean? And we discussed as part of the tooling, what's package resolution look like? As in, when you resolve this package down to a flat definition or something like a flat definition, what are those steps? What does it mean? How does it work? And that comes from the running code as well. We've considered the relationship between the Yang library data store schema and packages, and how that relates, and how debug fixes work. So again, that's something that drove this automatic resolution. So we've considered, again, when we deploy this, how's it going to work a bit more. And final one, I want to talk a little bit about Yang YPath, which is an idea of a JSON-like Yang path. I've raised this before. This one's still a sort of like concern of mine, because ideally that would go into a separate draft. That might slow this work down. So that's one thing that I think we want to maybe try and keep that fairly simple for the short term. and a tree diagram of what's changed. So this shows you the latest version of the Yang package schema. It's the entire schema for a Yang package. It's hierarchical. Everything in black is what was there before. The stuff that is in green are things that have sort of been added in and new things or changed in some way. And then we've removed one thing. We removed support for tags and we've added a few things in. So maybe we're making it a bit more complex, I don't know. But in some senses, we think this is good. And the key things that you can see that's changed is this ability to effectively include and exclude, or exclude really, modules and exclude mandatory features is one of the main changes. And then the other bit is finish off the schema mount. We've added in that mount path and parent references and the replaces package. So they all related to finishing off the schema mount work related to that. So those are the different changes. It is worth knowing when I was putting out the slides, there's some inconsistencies exactly how we do the inclusions and exclusions there. It may be we need to jiggle those fields around slightly, but it's just as we were going through the work, maybe we haven't ended up the final place, but I think we've ended up at the final meaning of what those things are. Right, so now on to the individual changes, and some of these are sort of more detailed. So the first one, removing support for tags. This was a relatively easy one. So the previous definition allowed you to have module tags associated with a Yang package. And then we had discussions about what happens to the module tags from an included packages. Do they bubble up collectively? Well, it doesn't really make sense. If they don't bubble up, does it really make sense to have them? We discussed what we would do as implementations, and none of us had any examples as to how we would use these things. Mount points out raised questions and things as well. So we just said, actually, let's just take this out, get rid of it, remove complexity. And maybe it comes back in as a future enhancement. I don't think it will come in this draft. If there's a concrete use case where somebody can bring that to the IETF and say, look, this is where this would make sense, and then we can discuss it in that context. Otherwise, it's gone. That's the easy one. Ignacio? Please don't tell me you have a use case.
Nacho Telefonica. Sorry, I was a bit late. Could you go back to slides? This one. Are you planning to include the deviation and augment relationships here?
No, I hope not. So in terms of deviation, so Yang modules define deviations, but it's duplicate information. That information logically exists in the modules anyway. And the augmented by, when we were discussing that in the context of Yang library, that causes all sorts of pain because it changes the relationship from augments which have a pointer into you, if your child augmenting into you, to a pointer that points out. And that locks you down in ways that you don't want. So I'm not sure the augmented by concept would work well with Yang packages. I think that relationship, and there's issues with it in Yang library as well, where it causes problems because the relationship's the reverse direction.
Okay.
We can discuss that one offline.
Okay, see. Thank you.
So finishing support for schema mount. As I said earlier on, this is needed for IETF Yang modules. And it sort of partially allows you to do design time mounts. So schema mount is defined as doing runtime mounts. You get the data at runtime. If with schema mount, you can go and ask Yang library and fetch the Yang library at a mount point to find out what's there at runtime. It doesn't help you off the box or you're writing the code because a server can change at any time. But because packages can also represent those, and because packages are designed to be available offline as files, it allows a vendor to say, look, this is what you would find at a mount point. This is the expectation. You may find extra stuff at the mount point in the same way you could anywhere else, but it says you'll find a minimum, you'll find this set of modules at that mount point. So it allows you to have a bit more in terms of a design time feel. Yes. Kent.
Yeah, I see the slide for schema mount, but also there's effort to do a full include. I think will that need to be considered as well in this work?
I don't know. I'm aware of full include, but I haven't read the recent drafts on it, so that might be something they need to look at more closely. So yes, good point. If you could drop me an email on that one, that would be good, so we don't forget it. But yes, I don't know.
I think you would end up with the identical semantics of implementation time versus definition time.
Okay. And then in terms of this work, so we added in parent references that's needed for schema mounts. That's part of that work. And that allows you to access nodes outside the mount jail. I don't know if that's the correct term. That's what I think of it as. And then the last bit is replaces packages. So this one is a bit more complex. So when we're going through the packages work, we had the idea of the ability to remove packages and take them out. So you could take a set of child packages and say, I want to exclude one of those child packages. In the process, we found out, I think in conclusion, that added way too much complexity, and we decided to take that out. So instead, but we had already included it for the schema mount equivalent, the replaces package. And instead, what this actually means, it allows you to wrap a package with some deviations or something else. So, or to remove some modules. I think I need a diagram for this one, but otherwise, read the draft maybe. It might be clear in there, it might not be. But I'll come back to that one. And then we may rename that to wrap packages rather than replace packages to make it clear as to what the dependencies and rules are allowed as to what you can do with that in terms of limitations. If I remember, I'll come back to this. Number 3 out of them is automatic resolution between module versions. So this was one of the issues that was raised, is saying in our earlier versions of the Yang packages work, we had that if you import 2 packages as child packages and they each either import or define different versions of the same module, what do you do? Because ultimately a Yang package has to give you a Yang schema, and a Yang schema is only allowed to implement a single version of a module. It might import only other ones, but I don't care about those so much. It's about implementation. You can only implement one. And the initial versions of this draft said, resolve those explicitly. So you explicitly say you have to choose which one you want. Excuse me. But we also considered the idea of doing that resolution in an automatic way. And because we're using Semver, or in this case, revision dates, it was observed that it might be better to be able to resolve these things automatically rather than requiring explicit resolution. But you can still do it explicitly if you want to. And the key case where this came up as being most useful is when you're using Yang packages on devices, it's likely that for us at least, we will advertise for a given software release, this is the Yang package for this software release, and we'll ship that separately, publish it separately, and that's what the devices would advertise. But you might come along and put bug fixes on the device that would modify the schema. And hence you aren't using exactly that Yang package, you're using a set of packages together. And if you have to, it's likely in that case, if you put a bug fix in for BGP that affected the BGP schema, you would end up with a new version of that BGP Yang module. And hence you'd automatically have this same issue where you get a collision between the base version for the device that has BGP version 1 and your bug fix that adds something in or changes something that's BGP 1.1. And hence, if you force it to be manual, it would force the device to have a parent package to define the base and then these inclusions. And we felt that that was less clear and less useful than advertising the top level of the device, the base package, and all the bug fixes at the same time. And so that drove us to saying, well, we think for most of these cases, automatic resolution would mean automatically, if you have a base module that's using BGP version 1, 1.0, and you've got a bug fix that's using BGP version 1.1, you naturally want the later version. So there's some limitations, but we felt that that was a good thing to do. And that drove this automatic resolution. But it also means that there's sort of less noise in these packages, and they mostly do the same thing. One thing that is sort of interesting with this is that a module now can be defined, for what we're using can be defined with either using a revision date or a version label. And we're hoping mostly that people will move to use version labels going forward, and then we'll resolve using Yang Semver. But there was a question as to what to do if you're trying to compare 2 module versions, one of them that's using a version label and one of them that's using a revision date. In an ideal world, you might say, well, the one that's got a version label also has a revision date, so just compare using revision dates. But that requires, it means you have to go and delve into the module definition itself to see what it's declaring and then do the resolution. Instead, we've said we use a simpler approach, and we just use the information, the package definitions that says, if they look like two version labels, or one of them uses a version label, we assume that's the later one. And it's only the case that if neither of them have version labels, then we'll use the revision date to resolve it, which I think probably pragmatically is good enough. And you can always do this explicitly if you have to. Hopefully you're still with me. Right. Right, so this one we spent a lot of time on, the ability, we've added in the ability to exclude modules or mandatory features. So there were some ideas with Yang packages that these should always be put together additively, and so you always just build things collectively together in the same way that Yang had this concept, or still in theory does have this concept, that you never make any non-backwards compatible changes. You always just add things on, new things on, you deprecate things, but you don't ever remove them. Well, the reality of it is that if it came to something like OpenConfig, if you made a package for all the OpenConfig Yang modules, many, if not most implementations would not support all of those modules. They'd probably support maybe half of them or 2/3 of them. So either they can't advertise an OpenConfig Yang package, they can't use that definition, or you need a way of saying, actually, I'm going to include this package, the OpenConfig package, but I want to take out modules on Wi-Fi routing or something, whatever it happens to be, or maybe some of the optical terminal devices or something. So take those out. So we wanted the ability to exclude modules. And again, we wanted the ability to say some features that previously were said that they had to be mandatory and they'd definitely be there will go away. They might be implemented, but they don't have to be. So we have these two concepts. And that's helpful, as I said, for advertising device conformance, like I said there. So the device would include the OpenConfigs package of a given version, but say, I exclude these modules. And since it defines your schema, that's a better way. What else do I say? So you can still use deviations as another choice rather than excluding a module. Our belief is actually that deviations should still be mainly used as a conformance thing for a device at the end, rather than like a different SDO using deviations to sort of modify the schema between different SDOs. So we don't want to change the rules with that, whereas excluding the module altogether works quite cleanly. And in terms of when you build these schemas together by including packages, excluding modules works really well. Deviations doesn't necessarily have the behavior you would naturally expect when you merge these things together. So we will probably give guidance that deviations should only be used near the end in terms of when you're sort of advertising device conformance or using that. Yes, Nigel.
Hi, Nigel Davis here. So on your mandatory optional point on the previous slide, in our TAPI work, we've been looking at properties. We had quite a number which were marked as mandatory, and then we kept coming across conditions when they couldn't be mandatory any longer. So it felt like it was mandatory, and oh no, it's not under those circumstances. So we've ended up with essentially almost everything as conditional. And it was that conditionality which is difficult to convey because it's mandatory under certain circumstances. Have you had any thoughts on that? We have a separate document which says that, here's a use case, here's some properties, these are mandatory here. Here's another use case, here's some properties. Even in this use case, they're conditional because you do this bit of this use case, then it's mandatory. So, and, sorry, one more point, and I'll go away. And also groupings, like you get a set of properties that together they make sense. So the three of them are, if you got one, you need the other two. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. But they're not mandatory again as a whole, as themselves. They're again conditional.
So to your first question on the mandatory versus optional, we had that not at the leaf level. This was all being done at the module level and the packages level, and it ended up adding a lot of complexity, too much complexity, because we were trying to figure out how you would advertise these things and what it would mean. And we got to the point where we were saying, I think that this is where, I'm going back quite a few slides to even further where I was discussing this, where we were before. Back here. No optionality in package definition. So we spent a long time, about a year ago, 18 months ago, considering this, and we sort of got stuck between this optionality and what it means and how you report that and represent it. And we came to the conclusion initially for the first version, we should try and keep it simple. Let's not tackle this problem. That's not to say it isn't important, and we may try and tackle it in future. But for the first bite of the cherry, let's try and get something out sooner that's simple, that more people will implement, rather than putting too much complexity in and for corner cases, but it may be one of those things that's just too hard to model in this way or something similar. But thank you. And your second question in terms of grouping leaves, I think that's even more complex. So that's even more out of scope of what we're doing.
Yeah. Can I just have one point on the end of that then? I think
Sure.
We've been looking at a number of situations where we've come across the need to express capabilities of things where, and this comes up under the heading of manifest or capability, or there's a whole range of different labels, specification, but each one seems to then point towards potentially part of the solution to this problem, because there's a secondary definition that then allows you to point at some properties and give conditions, and you can then go as far as you want to go in that other definitions. You could have nothing and then say, well, I just follow the Yang as it's stated, or I can say, well, actually under these circumstances in this specification of capability, and then that richness can be sort of pushed to one side, if that makes sense.
Yes, I mean, we've played with capabilities in terms of the Yang push work and the related telemetry work. So we've been using capabilities there to indicate what's supported versus what's not supported. And yes, I think that gives you the right sort of level and balance. However, there's a lot of complexity there where I can't remember 61, 69, that model allows you to define capabilities down to an individual leaf with keys or without keys. And I'm not sure yet when we were looking at that in terms of, for example, supporting or reporting which leaves support and change support, well, that might be you then reporting 50,000 entries or 100,000 entries, something large. And it's a complex problem. And I think we need to do maybe more or look at that in more detail. We've got a simple solution today. Maybe that's good enough, but this is something where it's not necessarily certain to me that that's the full solution.
I wasn't suggesting you do it here. No, absolutely. I think it's a big area that needs to be looked at separately. And I think it brings in an additional set of layers of definition. But what you then end up with, I think, is, and what the open config guys do, I think, is all properties are optional. And
yes.
Then you end up with this secondary thing that then gives you the nature. So in TAPI, we sort of ended up with what were mandatory as optional, essentially. And then our separate document, which is in English and has tables in it and so on, which is not the right way to do it really, but it's the only way we could find, has under these circumstances, this is mandatory. But it's we'd like to look for a stronger solution, but I don't see it as being your job here to do it, somewhere else, but in IETF.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Where was I? This one, ability to exclude. So I think I covered that one. So package resolution. So I was talking earlier about how these packages are hierarchical and they can include sub packages and things like that. And so the obvious question is, okay, how do you resolve these into a schema? How do you build that? So the draft now documents the process you follow to do that. And this is later talk about the ability to remove packages or not, or in fact, you can't remove them. And that's because some of the complexity that introduced in that resolution process. And now this resolution is very simple, that you basically, you recursively resolve each of the child packages, then you merge them together, you add in extra included modules, and you filter out any excluded modules. So we ended up with, I think, through changing this rules in terms of not being able to exclude packages, a much simpler solution. So, but this is something that came in very late, not the package resolution, but this last changes to not allow excluding packages towards the end. So the module scheme is correct. We need to add more text to it as well, though. Cannot exclude packages. So we had a long time of a draft until maybe a month ago allowed you to exclude packages. But that introduced all sorts of complexity in that module resolution. It meant you couldn't just resolve the child module and then exclude the packages. That doesn't work. You'd have to push the exclusions all the way down and re-resolve all the modules, all the child packages with that exclusion in mind, and then merge them together. And in the end, that added lots of complexity with relatively little benefit. And we came to a different idea to do that, is rather than excluding packages in that way, we came up with a different plan of not doing this and having a different idea of what it means to implement a package, which I talk on another slide. So the solution here was don't allow packages to be excluded. I've said we have a new definition of what it means to implement a package, and the tooling that you use to help you with packages will tell you the ground truth of what is supported and implemented at a package level or not. So we've moved the problem. So implementing a package, what does this mean in the latest proposal? So the idea that we came to is to follow something like the language Go or Rust interfaces, where they use something called structural typing. So effectively in those languages, and they're slightly different for both of them, you implement an interface if you implement all the methods that interface defines. So if it looks like you match that interface for your given class, then you implement that interface. And so what we decided for a package is when you have these hierarchical includes, you build up a list of packages that you've included at particular versions. And instead we check the implementation by building those child packages and building the full package, and then checking if all the modules that included package exports are supported and features are supported. You say, yes, I implement that package version because you implement everything it says it does, that matches. And there's some other variants of that. You might say, rather than I implement it and match it exactly, perhaps I implement a compatible version of it by having a later version. So that also works. And the other way around, you might say, when it came to like the open config interfaces or open config modules example I gave, where we exclude a couple of modules, then the package tool would say, actually, the device doesn't implement open config modules everything because it's leaving something out, but it would say, and it excludes, this is the reason why it doesn't completely implement that package. So that's where we've ended up at the moment. We still need to update the text a bit more. We're going to rely on tooling and try this out. Deviation is still something we need to factor in and think about. But this was one of the changes that happened relatively recently, which I think simplified a lot of this concept and made the solution hopefully better. A slightly strange corollary of this is, though, that you can actually implement multiple versions of an included package. So if you included package version 1, version 1.1, you may be compatible with both of those, one exactly compatible and the other one compatible with later versions of the module. That's certainly possible, and that's okay. It means that a client that's using your device and it's expecting either of those will work with what you expect. Good, we got past that one. So we also consider the relationship to device data stores, schemas, and supporting bug fixes. I've sort of talked through this already a bit, but where the example I was giving, that a single base package here, I said NOS 2531, maybe that's the base package you support, and then you've added some bug fixes on. I've got BGP and ISIS example there that are overriding some of those modules. And then we're using the automatic module resolution to be able to give you the full schema for the device. And it behaves as if you've got I don't know, pseudo package at the top level that just includes all of those packages, and you resolve it the same way using automatic resolution. So, but you don't need to define that pseudo package at the top. It's just done for you automatically. So again, we think this is quite nice and should work quite well. The last one is Yang path, so Y path. So there's a couple of cases. There's a case in this document where it's useful to give a path to Yang instance data, and also the schema light work also has something similar. And we don't really want to use XML anymore. We want to be something that's more JSON-like, effectively, very similar to the NACAM-based node instance identifier, but more JSON-like. And the Yang JSON has a definition that's sort of similar. So we're looking to do something like that. I think the version in this document could potentially be simpler than what Yang push light might want. There's an idea of maybe trying to push that into a separate draft. That might be a good idea, at least to explain it better. But I'm worried about having a dependency on an idea that might take a year or 18 months to sort of collect and get consensus. So it may be that actually the definition stays in this document of something that's like this, and we just have to repeat the definitions in two places, and they're not exactly the same. One's a superset than the other. So that's I think one of the open issues that might depend on how all this work progresses to see what we decide there. Right, I think I've got through all of them. I might even be able to give you a little bit of time back. As Joe mentioned, we have these weekly meetings. Our key work is to finish the work restructuring the sections. We need to finish the examples off, which means finishing off some of the tooling and things like that. We've got all these to-do issues on GitHub Tracker to go through and just say, yes, we think we've done this, or tweak the text, but we think those are relatively minor. So we're going to make more progress on the tooling, hopefully. And then we might make some progress on the model drafts as well. And then we want to finally do some more testing with IETF modules, with OC, with vendor modules to check this stuff actually is going to work. And we welcome you all to come along if you want to have discussions on this stuff. Yes, Ahmed.
Hi, Ahmed Al-Hassani, Swisscom. So back to Nacho's point. So you mentioned from the package, you can have like some auto translation to the Yang library. Would that give us the augmented by or not?
Could do. Because the information is all there. So augmented by doesn't give you any new information. It's already in all the Yang modules.
Oh no, so you have then you cannot go from the package and get the augmented by. You have to go to the actual modules and parse them, right?
Yes.
That might be a problem.
But you can't. But the augmented by, you can't put the augmented by into a package because you don't know what other packages are going to be added in and used together with it. So there's no solution that works by putting augmented by in, because you're putting the relationship in the reverse direction. There's then putting constraints on. It's putting massive constraints on how you can put packages together in a way that you don't want to, I think.
I understand that, but like if you remove that option from doing it easily when you go back to the Yang library where the augmented by exists, it might create some problems for people who depend on it.
It depends. So I know some of the tools for compiling the scheme is very slow, but other ones are fairly sure that which one, the YumaWorks one, I think would compile any of the schemas in a couple of seconds and then give you that list.
Yeah.
So it's fast.
It's a bit of a problem. So
okay.
It'd be nice to have it.
I don't.
And we can go on longer.
We'll chat offline on this, but I think it's an intractable problem. I don't think there's a solution here. But
all right.
So.
Thanks.
And that's it. Any other questions, comments? Has anyone understood anything I've said in the last 40 minutes? Blank looks, maybe. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks for that. Look forward to seeing how selection uses it.
Yes, yeah.
I noticed that there was a couple of discussion points there. Did you want to run polls for them, Rob?
Which ones on?
Like 2 or 3 slides back, I noticed that there was at the bottom of the slide. Yes, this one. Key questions.
I'm not sure that it's a useful question to ask at this stage, because I can't certainly give you an indication as to what I think the right answer is. So I think it'd be better when we get a little bit further to then bring this to the list and say, look, this is the choice. But at the moment, I'm not sure there's enough information to give a useful poll, if that's okay.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We are running a little ahead of time. I'm not going to run timers on the next few unless we start fully reusing all the time. Robert. Yang configuration templates.
So Yang configuration templates is a new internet draft, and I'm grateful to my co-authors Shofang and Deepak for their contributions, and Deepak is here today as well. So just a reminder of how we got here. So last year at IETF 121, this working group met to discuss various ideas for what a templating solution could look like. We then had 2 virtual interim meetings to gather requirements, and out of that, a team of 3 of us formed to write the first version of this draft that I'm presenting today. This draft really sets out the high-level ideas and concepts of how Yang templates could work, and our intention is to flesh this out in subsequent versions, and really today just to get a steer from the working group about whether this looks like we're on the right lines. The problem the draft is solving is that data stores often contain multiple subtrees of similar config, and currently the client has to repeatedly configure these same nodes in all of the different subtrees, and if the client wants to change them, then the client needs to change all of those nodes. In the draft, a configuration template is a fragment of configuration that's stored in the running data store, and a node of regular config in the running data store can apply a template to get all of the config from that template into that node's subtree. Also, config that's come from a template can be overridden by regular config. There are several pieces to this. So in the running data store, there's the config to define templates alongside the device's regular config. And that regular config is enhanced with metadata that can be used to apply templates to the tree. And then through a process of template expansion, the device produces the intended data store, which contains the regular config plus all of the config you get from expanding the templates that you've applied. I'm going to go through some key concepts in the draft, and then I'll walk you through a worked example, which I hope will help pull this together. So firstly, this slide is clearly in need of Joe Clark's AI image tool, but we'll wade through the text instead. So in terms of defining a template, templates have their own Yang model, which currently is just a list of templates. Each template has a name and some content. This means that the template definitions can be manipulated just like any other part of the device's config. And the template's content can be any config nodes in the device's schema. So templates are not specific to a particular piece of schema. Also, the template's content can use a pattern for list keys, which restricts which particular list entries the template takes effect for. And in the example later, that will become clearer. So that's defining a template. To apply a template, the draft defines a new piece of 7952 metadata, which I'll show you in a moment. Multiple templates can be applied to one node, and templates can be applied at any level in the hierarchy. So this metadata to apply a template to a node in the device's config. It's called apply templates, and its value is a space-separated list of template names to apply to that node. As far as I'm aware, there's no existing mechanism for a client to edit RFC 7952 metadata. So the draft proposes a mechanism to do this. In short, the client can specify the value of this metadata inside a regular edit config request, and then that metadata becomes stored on that node in the device. So that in particular, the client can apply a template by specifying the apply templates metadata in an edit request. So template expansion is how you go from the definitions and the apply templates to the intended data store, and the value of a node inside intended is determined by using precedence rules to decide which template you get the value from, or indeed whether you're actually getting it from the regular config. And the draft specifies these rules. Also, when the contents of a template is changed, template expansion happens again, and the intended data store is also changed. And various people call this living templates. Validation is a little bit interesting. So in the running data store, the template contents does not have to be fully valid. For example, a mandatory node can be missing from a template. And the reason for this is because at the point you apply the template, the regular config may provide that mandatory node. However, where validation is possible, then the server should enforce those constraints in the template. For example, if I try and define a template that sets the MTU leaf to -1, then the implementation should reject that because that leaf could never be valid. Also, the contents of intended after template expansion must be valid. So there's no change there. This slide is wrong. It should say worked example, but the small text is right. So the small text says that this example is using interface config, but just to remind you that templates work with any schema. So in this worked example, the running data store is on the left and the intended data store is on the right. Remember, it's the running data store where the client defines the templates and applies them, and then template expansion gives you the intended data store. So the client can define a template by adding an entry to the templates list. Here, the template is called interface MTU, and its content, that has the green brace next to it, and its content is a fragment of config from the interface schema. And that fragment sets the MTU leaf to 1500. Alongside the template definition in the running data store is also the regular config. And here the regular config is just a list of 3 interfaces. And at the moment, although the template has been defined, it has not been applied. And this means that that template expansion has no effect, and the contents of the intended data store just matches the regular config. It's just that list of 3 interfaces. To apply the template, the client sets this apply templates metadata, naming the interface MTU template, at which point when template expansion runs, that fragment of template content kind of matches that list. And so the MTU leaf that's in the template is added to every list entry in the intended data store. And hence every interface gets that MTU configured. But what if the client doesn't want that template to take effect for all interfaces? For example, what if you just wanted to set it for Ethernet interfaces? Well, in the template definition, the client can specify a pattern for list keys. So in this example, the client can specify a pattern for the interface name leaf, restricting it so it just applies to Ethernet interfaces. So if you look on the right-hand side at that loopback interface, because its name does not match, the MTU leaf is not added to that interface. When a client updates the contents of a template, the intended data store is updated. So here, if the MTU is updated to 9,000, then template expansion runs again, and that change takes effect in the intended data store. And finally, the client can configure the MTU leaf on a particular interface in the regular config, and the precedence rules of expansion means that for that list entry in the intended data store, it gets the value that's been explicitly configured. So that was an overview of the high-level concepts of the templating solution. In terms of next steps, there are various issues that the authors need to work through, and nailing down precisely some of the semantics of things like template expansion. And we'll do that and produce a 01. I'm quite happy to take questions. And indeed, if anyone wants to talk to me about templates this week, then please do grab me. Thank you.
Ramakumar?
Hello. Hi. So I'm Ram Kumar from Cisco Systems. So my comment would be that it's quite strange for me to have modification of an attribute resulting in some extraneous changes in the config. So why not have it as an action, for example?
So I think your question, you're basically saying that it's weird having this apply templates metadata. Is that right?
Yeah. So if I modify this metadata, the end result would be having many more changes in the actual config, and that feels strange to me.
So we're definitely open to alternative suggestions. I think modeling it as an action might be a bit strange, because in some sense an action is a transient thing, whereas really the fact that templates have been applied to a particular node is kind of part of the state of the data store.
Okay. And another question, is the content here an any XML node?
So yeah, so currently the content of the template is modeled as an NEXML node. It's possible something else could be used here, like schema mount, but the template content is a bit interesting because, for example, in lists, you don't have to specify a list key if you want the template to apply to all list entries, or indeed, even in the example of specifying a pattern, that pattern is in some sense, like your interface name may not be allowed to have star in, but the pattern is a regex, so it's sort of a superset of the allowed values. So currently it's modeled as an NEXML node. I don't think there's any existing mechanism that captures exactly what you could put inside the template content.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
I am. Yeah, two questions. First, you mentioned that you're tracking the requirements. I didn't see a traceability matrix in the document. Do you have a sense for how many of the requirements are being satisfied at this moment in this draft?
Off the top of my head, I don't have a tangible number, but we definitely, the three authors, we went through the votes from the interim meeting and sort of proactively made sure what we were doing was consistent with that.
Okay. It'd be good to see if there's anything that's being, any gaps that are existing here. Also, you mentioned on one of your earlier slides that there wasn't really an ability to edit metadata, and so that you were using edit config to, do that.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure if that's entirely true. Like, for instance, in the draft, it talks about setting the metadata to the empty string, and that would remove the metadata. I think we should focus or rely on existing mechanisms. For instance, edit config, merge or delete operations, or in RESTconf, put, post, those kinds of operations, and not introduce new mechanisms for how to do edits.
So are you talking? Are you? So tangibly, how do you think a client should apply a particular template to a node? What request do you think the client should make?
Well, if we were talking about RESTconf, it could be a put request. But this isn't perfect, because with a put, you're replacing the entire representation, and it means that you're not just editing the metadata, you're editing the entire object, the subtree. But still, that is the mechanism that we have to do such a thing. We could, as a working group, or perhaps the NetConf working group, introduce mechanisms for how to edit individual metadata items. But I think for now, this working group should rely on existing mechanisms.
Okay, that's fair enough. I suggest maybe I'll take this to the list, because maybe I haven't captured the difficulties that I perceive with the existing mechanism. So maybe I'll take this to the list. Thank you, Ken.
Yep.
Rob?
So Robert, I got the perfect slide here. So I'm just noticing that you've not got the template appearing itself in the intended configuration. I think that's an open question, or maybe it's not an open question. But I think that's an interesting and key concept of this solution, is to know as to whether you can know whether your template's been applied as a template as versus to the effects of the template, if that makes sense. So obviously you see what you have there. It's whether you also reflect that yes, this is the template that's in effect.
Yes, and indeed, in the interim meeting, I would say there was not a great consensus around what exactly intended should look like. Yep. I don't know exactly how intended. Are you saying? Do you think, for example, that the whole template should appear in intended in some form?
Well, yes. If the thing that's marked as template would just appear in intended as well, it'd obviously be maybe strange to have the apply templates bit in there as well. I don't know. I haven't thought deeply about it, but it's just an observation. There's a clear choice as to which way you go here.
There's definitely a choice, that's for sure.
Should be on.
So, James Cumming from Nokia. You mentioned that the templates don't have to be valid, and then you talked about the things like the mandatory statement. If this is only not valid in a specific area of the tree, does that push any requirements down to clients for offline? So do current clients have to then know this behavior and actually have code changes to make this work?
You mean code changes because the client doesn't know if their template definition would work?
Well, it needs to know that there is a mandatory for one thing and not for another thing. So if it's doing any kind of validation offline, that if it's in the template section, it needs to not care that the mandatory is there, just kind of ignore it. or at least error. Either way.
Yes, so I think based on what's in the current draft, yes, the client would need special handling so that the client would know that if it was forming the contents of a template definition, that things like mandatory nodes would not be required. So the client would need to know. But I think that in some sense, templates is a solution that's designed to make things easier for the client. And so in some sense, it feels to me like the client would always be aware that they were working with templates rather than arbitrary config.
Okay. And then a follow-up question. You said multiple templates can be applied at a particular level.
Yes.
The same level. What's the kind of precedence rules for those when you have template 1 and template 2 applied?
Yes, so I didn't know how much time so I have a couple of slides, so including one on this.
We'll give you 10 more minutes, and that gives extra time to the next two presenters. So you have.
Fine.
I know you were talking about when you were writing your slide, but still.
Yeah. You just keep me honestly. Which one do I need? This one, yes. So. This slide kind of sums it up, and it's written in the draft. In terms of precedence rules, so deciding in the intended config what value are we going to set for this particular node, non-template config always takes precedence. So that last thing in the worked example where the MTU was explicitly overridden in the regular config, that always has the highest precedence. And then if you have templates applied at multiple points in the tree, then the sort of innermost point takes precedence. And then if you have multiple templates applied to the same node, I've written here the order they appear determines precedence. I think in the interim, there was rough consensus that it should be kind of, if you apply T1 and T2 to a node, then T1 takes precedence over T2.
Okay, so just to clarify, so when you're applying T1 and T2, you effectively apply T2 first and then work your way backwards and apply T1 and the last row wins kind of approach.
Yes, so if you think about it that way, then yes. I should also say, by the way, that thank you for your mail, James, on the list, and the authors will reply to that soon.
Iowa?
Yeah, so this solution is more like generic and applies to all kinds of models, right? But we already also have Yang models that has defined its own template. What would be your consideration if we have Yang model that's already have their own template defined, and someone wants to apply this template solution, and how do you consider about the conflict resolution? Does it is it to be considered by this model, or is it like specific to the implementation?
That's a good question. So from the perspective of this draft, templates are completely agnostic to the particular Yang model, including whether that Yang model has its own templates or profiles mechanism. Clearly, from a sort of user's perspective, it would probably be confusing to use the generic templates mechanism and also specific templates or profiles in a particular model, but it's kind of out of scope for this draft. I think even if you had a model that had its own templating mechanism and you used Yang configuration templates, the contents of the intended config is still well defined, even if it's a bit loopy.
Okay, thank you.
Don? Oh, actually, I'm skipping Rashad. Sorry, Rashad's next.
Rashad, Equinix. So 2 questions. One is to add to what the previous person from Cisco said, the use of metadata to actually have the impact of changing the configuration. Was that done so that you can reuse the edit config RPC and not have to create a new RPC? Was that the main motivation, or were there other reasons?
I would say reusing the existing edit config RPC was the main motivation. Also, the fact that that to me, this apply templates metadata, or call it what you like, is part of the state of the data store. And to me, an edit request is how you change the state of a data store. That's why it's kind of done that way.
So second question is, so the reasoning behind this work is to make life of clients easier. So clients have to push configuration, but clients also have to read configuration to do some sort of consolidation that what's on the device is what they expect there. So what would get config returned back? That goes back, I think, to Rob's question as to, what would be intended, would your templates be? So you have to make it easier on, you can't make it easy on one side and hard on the other side. I don't know if you thought about that, but it's something you have to think about.
Are you saying that are you saying, for example, if a client is sort of editing the candidate config area, it should be obvious to the client when it commits exactly what the intended config will be? Like what the result of expansion would be?
Yes, but also if we do a get config, it has to be easy to map to what was sent in the edit config.
Including kind of if config came from a template.
Yes.
Like how did we get to this point? Yes, I think that's, I'm hearing a sort of general, very valid point here, almost of like traceability of config. Where did it come from? So that's something that the authors will look at.
Thank you.
One thing sort of related to that point is that one of the requirements agreed on in the interim and indeed written in the draft is that the result of template expansion should just depend on what's in the data store, not so. So in particular, in principle, the client could do the same expansion off device. There's nothing special about the device that governs the result of template expansion, and I think that will possibly help clients. Maybe.
Go ahead, Don.
Oh, Don Fedek, Levin Consulting. Just a question about the tooling for using this. I mean, I don't know if I'd ever use this, but I've used extensively YangLint for all the different modes of editing. But this seems like it's into the running and config and stuff like that. Have you given thought to tool sets outside of that or is there already something that you can test it outside offline?
We haven't currently given any thought to that question, but we will.
Yeah, because I mean, as someone who doesn't have access to the running side, but you can test it. It would be very valuable, I think, to anything like this.
Thank you.
Mahesh, my comment was similar to what Ken was talking about, using existing operations within that conference account to add and delete. Because as I was thinking through the examples you have, I don't know what happens if someone wants to actually delete the template or
delete the template definition or or unapply the template.
Both, in some sense. You do want to delete the template definition and then turn, I guess, the application of that template in the intended config also gets deleted.
Yep. So I would say currently you can delete the template definition by deleting the list entry. And the draft doesn't say this, but probably the applied templates metadata should be updated so it no longer references the template that's been deleted. Okay. I take your general point about sort of agreeing with Kent. Yeah.
I was just going to take myself out of the queue, but because I have the same question, Joe Clark, Cisco, but I don't know what would happen then to the in the intended. So let's say, for example, I chose to remove the template. Do those MTU leaves disappear then from intended, or do they still stay there?
I would say yes, they disappear.
Okay. And if I'd overridden, okay, the override would remain. Okay. And also big +1 for something like augmented by, but on instance data, so you know what template specifically made that change.
I hear you all loud and clear.
I had a quick follow-up, Rob. When I quite like the applied templates approach, the metadata approach, but if you're deleting the application of it with the quote, over time, does that not mean you end up with applied templates, quote, pretty much everywhere, or should the draft explicitly say that if you have a blank apply templates, that actual metadata tag gets removed?
So I think the draft does say that, or if it doesn't, it should say that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's all the questions. I just want to say thank you very much to the working group for so much engagement, and we'll take these various questions to the list. I think some of the points that have come up are quite fundamental to the future of the draft, so it would be good if to sort of mail the list and have some discussions and maybe get some at least vague consensus around the right way forward.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is it okay if you take it to the list, or if you if we have time at the end, how about we take it? All right, thanks so much. All right, we're going to move on to Ahmed. Validating any data in Yang library context. Actually, I'll make a comment I was going to make at the end because it applies also to Roberts. Both any data and any XML, you're talking about putting in arbitrary nodes underneath it, and it's not. Neither of them permit that in Yang 1.1. Neither of them are permitted in. Sorry, Yang 1.1 does not allow that. So I know that in principle we have Yang push that does it, but that's really in violation of Yang 1.1. So I think we have to grapple with that issue. And that's on Robert's draft, the existing Yang push RFC, and your document. At least that's my reading. So we'll take it offline and have some good discussions on it.
Let's have a discussion about it for sure.
Yeah.
So, hello, my name is Ahmed El Hassani. I'm presenting here on behalf of myself and my co-author, Thomas Graf. And the point here is to not allow people to put anything under any data anymore and try to have a way to validate it. So let's put some context here. So in RFC 7950, any data is intended to include any Yang data under it from a Yang data tree that is not known at design time. And the RFC left open for the validator to do via external mean to obtain the model that was supposed to model what's under the Yang, under the any data, and validate it. So this has been used in multiple RFCs at the moment. The one that we use most at the moment is the Yang push, as was mentioned. What that means. So for example, here, if I have a notification defined, this is from the push update notification. And under the data store content, which defined as any data, I can put, for example, IETF interfaces. But nothing prevents me, for example, from misspelling interfaces here, for example. This is still going to be valid, looking like a valid Yang, and most libraries will just accept it as it is. What we want to try to do here with this draft is to say one method of using an external mean to look up the Yang schema that represent whatever is under the any data is to look through the Yang library. And basically here you say, okay, I see this IETF interfaces being used under any data. I know how to look it up in the Yang library, and based on that, we go validate and we make sure whatever is thrown under the any data subtree is always going to be valid according to a schema that was defined in a Yang library context. So we have presented this in IETF 119. We did some changes to clarify our documents. Categorize it to two categories here. One is about making sure the language is clear, especially when it comes to what is complete validation and candidate validation. And here we refer to the same language that was done by 7950. So we're not adding a new type of validation. We're using what's already been defined. We actually tested with the Yang library, with libyang implementation, to make sure what we were saying here actually makes sense from implementation point of view. And in the implementation, we extended libyang. We haven't pushed that to the mainstream yet, but we plan to do it at some point soon to actually have some code, running code to validate our ideas. And for the next steps here, we were not sure where to put this document, whether it's NETMOD and a MOPS. We have discussed with the chairs, with with the ADs, and I think with the recommendation we received is to start in NETMOD, and therefore we are asking for work group adoption today. And for the next steps, we will do some extension to LibYang to make sure we have the complete validation aspect and make them public. So for today, any questions, and would be nice to have some adoption call.
Go ahead, Rob.
So I was just trying to, I haven't had a chance to read the draft. So are you adding stuff into Yang library here to define what's there? Or are you adding metadata to when the data's coming back to say, reference back to Yang library? What's the core?
So all what we are doing in this draft is saying this known through protocol signaling or other means means look the namespace that you find in the any data in the Yang library.
Okay, you took the Yang push example though. The NA data is going to be different depending on what the subscription is. So it's not going to be one particular module. It could be if you subscribe to IETF interfaces, you get IETF interfaces. If you subscribe to something else, you get something else there. So how do you handle that case?
This is a runtime construct, right? When you validate, you look what's there and you look up. It's not static, right?
I'll chat to you offline. I'm still lost.
So you do this lookup when you do the validation, right? So whenever for every message you validate, you take what's under any data and you see, was this valid according to some schema that was in the Yang library, right? So you're not fixing it. It's not fixed.
Yeah.
Someone, the first message might contain interface data. The second message, BGP, ISS, nothing prevents you from that as long as every message have some schema defined in the Yang library.
Okay. I'll check you offline.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. So you mentioned that this work's been going on since 1.1.19?
Yes.
Okay, so I missed that. So was it in a different doc? Because it's a 0.0.
Yeah, it was a different name, and we had a misunderstanding, so we redirected it to NMOB, and then we have to redirect it back here. So that's part on us. We misunderstood how to target the document.
Okay, and then not a question, but a statement. We have an NMOB document which has a normative reference on that.
Yes.
So I guess that's one reason why you're asking for adoption.
Exactly.
But I think, you will need to have some discussions in NETMOD, in my opinion, first.
Okay. And just FYI.
And were you speaking as NMOP chair or as individual?
Almost. And I forgot to say my name. So yes, I was speaking as NMOP chair.
All right, thank you.
Yes. And to the first question, yes, it has a different name as 00, but if you look in the data tracker, they are linked and it's clear it's one replacing the other.
So we're going to do a poll to see if the working group is interested or believes that this is a problem that needs to be addressed. And you'll note that I said this, not giving a description of the problem. And I'd like to use no opinion for those people who are confused by what the problem is. So if you say no, no opinion, it means you really don't understand the problem statement. By the way, that's where I'm going. So we have a pretty reasonable number of people in the room, if I look virtually in the room, and we are less than 50% participation. And of those, we're pretty close split between, yes, it's a good problem, and yes, we would like clarification on the problem. We have very little saying no.
Yeah.
So I think my read, and I'm going to, Ken's not standing here, so we can't confer. So Ken can jump in too and disagree with me. But my read is we think there's something here, but we need a little more clarification of what the problem is that you want to work on.
All right.
And then once we have a clear definition of the problem, we can then really consider of whether or not the solution being proposed is the right one, and go from there. Benoit, please go ahead.
Thank you. So, Benoit Claes. So, Ahmed, we discussed this a couple of times in the past, and yes, I checked that you had this already in March of last year. And with all respect, I don't think that you've been addressing this the right way here for this audience, because maybe if you have a couple of more minutes, you want to precisely mention the issue you're solving with your Yang push and where you stuck when we try to validate this with an example.
Yes.
And then people will get it here.
Yes.
Maybe you took the shortcut because you've been working on this already for some time.
I think we can spend 5 more minutes on this and still leave time for the last presenter.
So this is, let me get back a step here and to the example here. Like last time I went through it a bit more. This time, yeah, it's been a year. I should have spent more time on this example. So from a Yang module designer and from someone who's producing Yang messages, having the option to use any data is very flexible one, and it's very useful in many cases. Because for example, in Yang push, you don't know what the user have subscribed to. So you want the ability to send anything that the user subscribed to without having to define a new message type for every kind of subscription that someone can configure on the router. So here we agree that it's all, any data is something we need and it's good for us. I don't want to change that. Now, when we come to the consumption side of this, as someone who's consuming these messages, you always want to be able to verify that what has been sent to you is correct, according to what you have requested in case of Yang push. So in Yang push, you already subscribe to certain XPath, and you know what the router should give you. You want the ability to say, did the router send me exactly what I asked for? Did it send me something valid? Or there was a bug and was sending me garbage, that just looked like Yang. And here exactly what the problem here, where there is a need for this, because if you think from someone who's producing data, yes, I have any data, I'm pushing, it's done. But from the other side, of someone who cares to make sure that the data that they're getting from the routers are correct, according to whatever schema they claimed it to be in their, and then you can check that from the Yang library, or maybe later when from the Yang packages or something like that. And in the case of Yang push, the subscription started message will tell you I'm using module 1 and 2 and 3. So you can also know that these are the modules I need to get and make sure they are in the Yang library, and I need to validate that whatever under the AnyData tree is correct. I hope I make that statement a bit more clear here.
I think that's very helpful. Rob, are you in or out of the queue? Rob Wilton? What? Oh, the queue. I didn't mean for the queue to be locked.
So for this particular example here, I might be wrong. I'm fairly sure that Yang push says that the data you return back, that data store contents, has to be something against the schema of the data tree. So the Yang push specification already says that must be valid data against the schema, because you get the full schema path at the beginning of the data store contents node.
So Yang push, I'm not sure what the exact language was there, but here my reference is RFC 7950, where it does say you should learn the schema of this through external means. So for me, that implies...
I don't think it says that.
Actually, it's in the top text. If you can go back to the slide.
I know, but that doesn't say the same thing that you just said.
Yeah, okay. Do you mind if we go to the text?
No, I'd like to. We're out of time on this one. I need to go, but I'd like to try the poll again. with your phrasing on that slide that we just saw in your description, which is a little different than the other version, and see if we get a different result. And after this poll, we're going to have to move to the last presenter.
Okay.
Unless
Fair
Kent,
enough.
again, can always jump in.
That's fair enough.
So yes means you think we should work on the problem of, what was that? How can we validate under any data? And then no is you don't think we should work on it. And no opinion is you still want clarification on the problem statement. We are not asking anything about the solution proposed in the draft at this time. I think Benoit said, let's try and see if we can get a different result. I am not seeing a materially different result, unfortunately. And so I think I'm going to close the poll and say we're still looking for a tighter definition.
Yeah.
Perhaps have a separate draft that just says, here's the problem you want to work on, and then solution TBD.
Okay.
Kent, you wanted to say something?
Exactly. No, I was going to say the same thing. The problem statement's a little bit unclear, but definitely the solution's missing.
Perfect. Is it possible to ask at least the people who said no, at least offline, can explain why it's no? No opinion, I understand.
That would be great. If you said no, there's a request. Send your comment, send your objection to the list so we can talk about that as well.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. And now we are on to. I don't have it in front of me. I apologize. The last slot. Who's Rajesh?
Thank you. My name is Rajesh. My full name is Rajesh Tarakat Venkateshwaran. My parents wanted me to have a big name for myself. So what is the next slide?
The clicker should be working. Yeah, there it goes.
Okay, so we are a big consumer Yang files. It's a scope for a lot of our network management products, and considering we have so many knobs that could be tweaked on many of our devices, we have a large number of deprecations and obsolescence that happen regularly. Like for instance, every release we have maybe between 10 and 50 or 60 different knobs that need to be deprecated. And the current process that we have when leaves get deprecated or containers become deprecated is that there's a lot of offline documents floating around, CSVs, text files, emails that say, this is the replacement for this particular leaf node, right? And the key issue with this approach is not just the time that it takes or how error prone it is, but also that it doesn't lead itself to any kind of automation. Right? If I want to have tools that I can build that can look at the Yang, if I want to aggressively adopt the replacement leaves for deprecated nodes, that's a big challenge with the way we currently operate, right? So as it's said here, it's not machine readable. It's all ad hoc processes in each of the way in which you chose to interpret it. It's inconsistent, and you can always go wrong with it. Now, the problem statement itself has been raised a long while back. It's asked in the context of Yang Next. And I did see a lot of people supporting the problem itself, right? And out here, a simple proposal was articulated when the problem was listed here to just how to capture the deprecations. We've just tried to build on this in the proposal that we have. We want to call it a new module called a replacement info. It's fairly straightforward and simple, but the impact can be huge. It can be a huge help. So what I show down here is if I have an old leaf, I say it's deprecated. And I could say that its replacement is living in the same module, in the same container under this new leaf. The devil is, however, in the details. You can have leafless, you can have containers getting deprecated, you can have the replacement in the same module, in different modules. And one of the more complicated details is with groupings, right? Because groupings could be used in so many modules and Yang files. And then what do you do if you have a replacement or a deprecation in a grouping? So we talk about a different approach slightly, which is to say a relative path, but I just say if I have a replacement in the grouping, how do I handle that? So, I mean, but essentially, all I'm here to tell you all is that if we can get these replacement info into Yang itself, in place in Yang itself, it could be a huge benefit for all kind of automation flows that can understand and interpret what it takes to migrate to the more recent versions of these leaves. It's going to help our clients understand this better, and it's for model designers, they can model that better too, right? Yes, so I just want, we have an implementation at Cisco that we are already enforcing in many of our versions, just to see the benefits of being able to automate this entire process, right from generating the code that uses the new replacement nodes to the ones that can validate and find out that clients have actually moved to the new nodes, right? So I'm just here to solicit and ask all of you if you have any similar implementations, if you're interested in similar implementations, and obviously we'll not love to wait for Yang next, but it's going to be a while before it's going to be in use. So the proposal is to start with an extension and hear from all of you if this solves a real problem, and if you have any suggestions on improvement.
Kent?
Yeah, hi, Kent as a contributor. Can you go back to slide number 4, please? Two slides back. There we go.
You need to be at the mic. You should come
First
back.
question. So you call it replacement info, and the node was deprecated. Is there a reason for not calling it deprecated info? And in particular, would you expect the replacement info to remain once the node has been obsoleted?
You have to be at the mic, please. Use the mic.
I did have a bit of a problem with the hearing. I was just having to read that out. So no, once it's obsoleted, I expect it to go out of Yang. I think when you have this articulated as while it's deprecated, that's when we hope clients will anyway have to migrate. That's when they need the replacement info. And once it's obsoleted, it's not needed anymore.
And the reason why I ask is because the obsoleted nodes may stay in the Yang module for a long time. And, we wouldn't necessarily want, it could, fill up make the size of the Yang module much larger. Also for readability purposes, it might be making more sense to call it deprecated info. And then secondly, you're using the extension mechanism, and so it's just a string, but the string is actually encoding a 2-tuple. What is it? Is it absolute path versus relative path? And then what is the path? Is there any way that we could make this a structure so it's actually 2 separate leaves, one called kind of replacement and the other being the path that got replaced? Or I shouldn't say the path that got replaced, but where the replacement is expected to be. And also, by the way, the replacement might be multifold, right? So something could get deprecated, but how you're supposed to represent it again would be in different, maybe more than one place in the new model.
Kent, I think you're diving into solution, and we haven't had agreement on the problem yet. So if it's okay, I'd like to say solution discussions, I'd like to table until we get to a poll on whether the group thinks this is a problem that needs to be solved. Before we do that, we have a few other people in queue. Balazs?
Actually, we also have a solution already for this, so we think it's a very relevant problem.
Okay, great, thank you. Rashad?
Rashad Equinix, sorry, I was trying to catch up on the document. I haven't read it. Does that extension apply just for leaf nodes or for other nodes, like, I mean, containers?
No, it doesn't just apply for leaf nodes. It applies for containers. It applies for leaf lists. It applies for groupings. We have it all covered because we have all of these cases
Okay, thank you.
in the Yanks we deal with. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Deepak?
Deepak from Nokia. Why do we need a new extension instead of, let's say, an annotation? I'm basically providing some auxiliary information about a replacement node. So why not an annotation or metadata?
So I think the idea is to have structure so that it can be parsed by automation tools. So the better structured the information is, the easier it is to work off it.
Okay, I'm next in queue. I'm actually in as chair. Can you go back to the problem statement? Okay, so I'm going to run a poll asking basically the same question that we asked for the last draft. Is this a problem that should be worked on, should be addressed by the working group? Same options, yes, no, and no opinion means you want more information on the problem. And whoever closed the door, thank you. That actually made a big difference. Okay, it's looking like we are getting about the same participation level as the last poll, which is, you know, a reasonable number of people in the room, but not a majority. And actually, it is the majority. It's just not a super majority. And about 2-to-1 split on thinking this is a good problem. The rest thinking they want more information. So again, we're not getting objections. So there's, I think I would read this as there's some general interest in us working on the problem. That's great. And we also heard that others already have solutions, and it would be good to get those people who have solutions to come in to bring their solutions so we can start looking at the different solutions on the table and whether or not we merge, whether we move forward with one solution over the other. So I think this is a pretty positive result on the working group looking at this problem. So thank you for bringing that in. We do have time for a couple more people in queue. We have Rob.
So I was just going to comment on Deepak's question in terms of, you said, why is this an extension versus instance data? And I think it's because you are addressing this at the schema level. It's a schema that's being deprecated, whereas instance data would apply to effectively the data that's being returned from the device. So I think doing this as an extension seems like the right and obvious choice to me. I also think we should probably, I think this is worth, as a secondary point, I think this is worth addressing before we wait for Yang 2.0 or 1.2, whatever. I think that was going to take too long. That might be a minimum 5 years, whereas this could be done much quicker.
I think, like for many other similar things, it is important to be able to evaluate this in design time, not just runtime. So extension is a good method for that. We also use an extension. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. We are at the end of the session. Thank you all for participating. And whether you're local or remote, and even though it's Monday, we will see you at the next, at least in NETMOD, at the next IETF. And with that, we have Kent.
Oh, well, just thank you everybody for joining another successful meeting. Have a good rest of the week.
Yeah, really appreciate all the contributions. And again, thanks to all those who worked on that long list of documents that are working their way through the ISG. And Mesh, thanks for handling that workload. See you all soon. Thanks, Ken. Oh, and thanks to James for taking comments and everyone else who contributed to the notes.